The timing mechanism is defined as your ability to know when to initiate the transition from the loading phase into the launching phase, so that should you decide to swing, you will have enough time to get the bat around to make good contact with the ball. Therefore, in this video, we will first identify how the body transitions from the loading phase into the launching phase, or in other words, the mechanism. And then second, we will identify when this mechanism should occur, or in other words, the timing. Okay, so you may recall what I said in the previous video about the cocking of the wrists, where it is an action that the hands and wrists perform on the bat handle at the very end of the loading phase and into the first part of the launching phase. This means then that as the wrists are cocking or still loading, other parts of the body must have started or entered the launching phase, which is a phase that produces the swinging of the bat toward the contact point with the ball. So the cocking of the wrists represents an overlapping point of these two phases and is directly involved with the transitioning of the body from the loading phase into the launching phase. Now the question therefore is this: what part or parts of the body are first to enter the launching phase while the wrists are still cocking in the loading phase? To answer this question, let's go back and take a look at the video where we first saw the cocking of the wrists take place. Here we are at the beginning of the cocking of the wrists, and as we advance the video here in a second, the thing we want to pay attention to is the timing step, which involves the player's left foot. The moment it begins to lower back to the ground will be the signal that the launching phase has begun, and that looks to be right about here. So this would also mean that the hips and legs have just begun their explosive rotation back toward the pitcher in the launching phase. But interestingly enough, this image shows that the bat head has not yet reached its furthest backswing position. That doesn't occur until here. So this could only mean that the entire upper body, including the spine, the shoulders, the arms, and especially the hands and wrists, are still in the loading phase. So to answer our question earlier, which was, what part or parts of the body are first to enter the launching phase while the wrists are still cocking in the loading phase? And the answer is the leg involved with the timing step, which is our player's left leg here, as well as both of the hips. This transition is the mechanism. As you start to place your timing step back to the ground, the hips will just start their turn with it. And both of these launching phase movements occur while the wrists are still cocking in the loading phase. This is how the body starts its transition from the loading phase into the launching phase, and this transition continues for as long as the wrists are still cocking. The transition or mechanism ends when the wrists are fully cocked, but again, that doesn't occur until the bat head reaches its furthest backswing position. So again, with the wrists now fully cocked, not only does this signify the end of the loading phase for the entire body, but also the end of the transition, or in other words, the end of the mechanism between the two phases. So this image that shows the end of the transition between the two phases, or the end of the mechanism, is very important to us here. We know the wrists are fully cocked, and we see the upper body rotated as far back as possible. And it also shows that the launching phase has advanced further along as we observe the timing step completely return back to the ground. But most importantly, this figure here represents the point in this particular swing where the entire body is undergoing a maximum stretch, or where the upper body is turned farthest away from the lower body. Now, looking back, there were a lot of muscles that helped contribute to the player getting into this position, but the role the cocking of the wrists plays in all of this is as follows. Having thrust the bat head to its furthest backswing position shown here, the maximum stretch position is achieved by the momentum of the bat head pulling the hands, the wrists, the shoulders, and upper body in the opposite direction of the intended path of the swing. So the purpose of the mechanism is not just to transition you from one phase to another, but to do so in a way that enables you to develop as much stretch in your muscles as needed. This stretching is very important to you as a batter because, as we learned in the last video, it is one of the keys to developing a faster and more powerful rotational bat swing. And knowing when the right time to create this stretch within your muscles and then using it, or in other words, the timing, is what we are going to talk about next. If you recall in the last video that the stretching in the muscles in the opposite direction of their intended path produced a reflex in them called the myotatic reflex. And this stretch reflex essentially gives the muscle a running start in the same direction of its intended path of contraction. And this enables the muscle to contract much harder and faster than if it wasn't first stretched. But we also learned that while we are somewhat in control of when these reflexes are created, we cannot control the length of time that they will last. So these reflexes, which stay in your muscles for only about a half a second or less, need to be used within that time period if you ever expect to swing the bat with any power. So the challenge you face as a batter comes down to how much time you can let go by while waiting on the pitch before you initiate the mechanism that creates the stretch reflexes in your muscles. If you create them too soon, they will disappear before you even have a chance to use them. And if you create them too late, you won't be able to get the bat around in time to make good contact with the ball. So this is the timing part of the timing mechanism, which is the ability to know when to initiate the transition from the loading phase into the launching phase, so your stretch reflexes can be created and used within a split second of your decision to swing the bat. Now, the greatest recipient of this timing mechanism is, of course, the bat head, and this next clip will clearly show the effects on it. Starting in the maximum stretch position, where the player has knowingly cocked his wrists to push the bat head to its furthest backswing position, the stretch reflexes that were just created within the muscles along the spine, upper back, shoulders, arms, and wrists accelerate the contraction within these muscles back in the direction as the same path of the swing. This causes a rapid change of direction within the bat head that further helps the player to accelerate the bat even harder and faster to the contact point with the ball. So once again, the timing mechanism is defined as your ability to know when to initiate the transition from the loading phase into the launching phase, so that should you decide to swing, you will have enough time to get the bat around to make good contact with the ball. Thanks for watching the video, and if you'd like to, please leave a comment or suggestion regarding this segment of The Anatomy of the Baseball Swing.